Don't just live for tomorrow, or just live in yesterday. Just be glad for all you have that's in today. And though you've come through many obstacles.
Hey everyone, Connie here, and welcome to my blind reaction to episode 5 of Arcane. But before we get started, there is something I need to address. So I'm not going to say who, I'm not going to call out names. If they want to say it was them, they can do that. But I'm not going to call out names or anything. But there were some people in the comments last time who had an issue with something I said, with one of my issues about episode 4. That issue was Caitlin, and specifically that they were trying to make Caitlin one of the more likable characters, despite her being a cop. And I noted last time how that was in kind of poor taste, considering things like the Black Lives Matter riots that happened the other year, that with just the entire situation going around with a lot of that becoming more, in the light, with the corruption of the police force in America, for an American series to highlight a cop character and make them, again, try to make them likable and positive, is not a good look. And I got these comments basically saying that it doesn't feel right to judge like all cops on the actions of some. That saying like an entire group of people is bad without exceptions is a negative way to look at it, and putting people into boxes and stuff. And it was even compared, that doing this was even compared to people having done the same to queer people. And that's probably the part of this that made me realize I need to explain this as a queer person myself. So keep in mind, I am speaking from an American perspective. I don't know how the police are in other countries. I don't know about any corruption or whatnot they might have or don't have. So I'm speaking strictly from an American perspective on an American-made show. That, yes, while made with a, I believe, French animation studio, is still an American-made show. So let's talk about this. Here in America, the police force is so heavily corrupt, it's not funny. And this is not new either. Like, a lot of people think like this is a new thing that only happened within the past even decade, but no. The police force has always had corruption. It's just gotten worse because they realize they can get away with this shit. But this has been going on for a long ass time. And they do horrible things like basically shooting first, asking questions later, and get away with it for basically murdering people, a lot of times who are innocent. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and so many others have lost their lives because the police just act without thinking, without analyzing a situation, without putting forth any kind of possible critical thinking skills. They just shoot because excuse me, because they're trigger happy, they're violent, and they want to be able to kill. No matter whether it's right or not, that doesn't matter to them. And yes, of course, I and everyone else out there knows that not all cops are like this. No shit. But even the cops that aren't are still, like, actively being part of a system that is. The system in general is so skewed to favor these cops that if they're ever taken to court, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be freed of all charges. They're not going to face repercussions for their actions. Only in the most recent years has things begun to flip on that. And only because of such public outcry. But for so much of history here, for so long, they have gotten away with this shit. And they still do, continue to. A few high-profile cases won't change that. Most of the time, they're still getting away with this. And it's against people of color, it's against queer people. The police force is constantly abusing, killing, and just destroying these communities. And a lot of the times they just try to use excuses. Like, we thought this kid had a gun. No, you fucking didn't. You did not fucking think this kid had a gun. You did not fucking think this kid was an active threat and danger to you, to where you had to shoot him. No one with any level of brain cells would think that. And the system just enforces this shit. The system will always side with the cops. The system will always side against the victims. And I mean, you could also note that there's some white supremacy steeped in there. Like, undeniably. This violence, this horrid action takes place mostly against people of color. And there's been active evidence that that is fully intentional. Again, not in every case, obviously. No shit. But in so many cases to where it's become an institutionalized issue. This internalized and institutionalized racism within the police department is so deep that it's part of their identity. So while not every single cop is necessarily inherently bad, they are still actively choosing to take part in something in a career that is. Being a cop is actively saying that it's not a deal breaker for you. That the corruption and racism of the police isn't a deal breaker for you wanting to be one. It's saying that you don't care and that you want to be a part of it anyways. You're being a part of the problem. And no amount of trying to say, like, oh, but I can change it from the inside will actually help, because that's a bullshit line. You're not going to be able to change it from the inside. One person can't do that. Hell, 100 people can't do that. It's not going to happen. It is not going to be changed from the inside. it can only be changed from the outside, and only when enough people rally together. Unfortunately, people only rally around certain moments and then just kind of wave it off the rest of the time. They have to, if they kept rallying about it, the actual change could possibly be made. Granted, there's a lot of factors that go into that too, but that's neither here nor there for the issue here. So, when I'm going on about Caitlyn here, understand that I'm not saying Caitlyn herself is like a bad guy or anything. She's clearly not. I'm not even saying like in this world the police force is as corrupt and dangerous as it is here in America. Because although it has shown some signs of possible corruption, it's kind of impossible to make that comparison completely. But understand that as a queer person, as someone who has had many friends of color, and as someone who has had friends, both queer and of color, who have been victimized by police, understand that when I say these kind of things, when I use terms like ACAB, all cops are bastards, when I just hate on police and cop force in general, in anything I watch, anything I react to, any games I play, etc., etc., it's because of knowing what cops have done in my country, in the experiences that are around me, in experiences that my friends have gone through. Of course, it doesn't mean literally every single cop, but they're the ones who are quote unquote good are still part of a corrupt system and choosing to be part of it. If you worked a job and found out that your boss was dealing drugs to kids, you would quit that job and report your boss. Of course you would. So why would you work as a police officer when you know that the police are internalizing racism, murder, homophobia, transphobia, shit like that? Why would you do that? You can't change them from the inside. That's bullshit. Are those things just not deal breakers for you? Wanting to be a cop? Your desire to be a cop is stronger than your moral and ethical obligations? It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And at this point, it's just if me saying this kind of stuff bothers you, like, this is how I am, and I'm not going to censor myself or excuse me, or cut away things just because some people don't like them. I'm going to be true to myself, and that means speaking my mind on this stuff. If you don't like that, I'm sorry, but go watch someone else's content. I'm not going to change that. And this isn't just an opinion that's going to change either. I despise cops. Not because I think every single literal one of them is bad, but because of what the police stand for. What they have actively done to friends of mine. And so on and so forth. That's why when I see characters like this in shows, I don't often side with them. That's why I can't reconcile Caitlyn as a character right now, because I don't like the path she's taken. I don't like that she was written, or that she was chosen to be this likable character in this series, when there's other characters they easily could have gone with. It bothers me. And like I said last time, the only way to fix this would be to do something like having her leave the force and become some kind of like private investigator or bounty hunter. Something that would keep to her desire to help and enforce things, catch bad guys, all of that, but would not be associated with corruption and things within the real life context of the main audience of this film, or of this series rather. Again, with a series that is made by Americans and everything, as an American series for a majority American audience as its main demographic, it just seems really, really tone deaf, considering everything that has happened in the past few years in regards to that. So I do apologize for taking so much time to discuss this, but I don't apologize for my thoughts on this, for my views. I don't. It's not going to change. And it's not the same as comparing it to people having put queer people in a box or judging them on like judging all of them as the same thing or whatnot. Because again, the queer people are the oppressed in this situation, while the cops are the oppressors. That is the key difference here, and changes the entire thing. So no, it's not comparable at all. So again, if these views bother you, and if this is going to hurt your enjoyment of my reactions to this, I would suggest just either stopping to watch my reactions to Arcane or going and watching someone else's content, whatever works best for you. Because again, this is something I'm going to bring up again. Very obviously. This is something that's going to be on my mind while watching. Because again, this has affected friends of mine. This has affected so many people. People of color, queer people, who have been murdered by cops. Who have been horribly abused, mistreated. Just had so many horrible things happen to them by cops. All because they could be, and all because of institutionalized bigotry that has allowed them to be. So, yeah. But let's actually talk about last episode. So, last episode started Act 2 of Arcane, and we jumped into the future, an unknown period of time, but presumably like 10 years, I would say. So Powder is now working for Silco as kind of seemingly his right hand, and is going by the name Jinx. She has a lot of the gadgets and stuff that she had in the games and all that we would recognize her for those of us who played the games, but does not feel, in terms of personality and character, like Jinx. Almost at all. she honestly seems kind of like this edgy emo kid who's just sad because her big sister didn't love her enough. That's literally what she seems like. And it's ridiculous. Um, so you also have Caitlin, who is trying to do her best to track down the bad guys and everything, despite not being put on those kinds of cases by her boss. Um, so in the end, she decides to go and try to get more information without being told she could, and ends up the person who could inform her of that in the prison, who was working for Silco, got his jaw broken by none other than Vi. And so now she's going to go talk to Vi. So that's going to be interesting. And we have Jace, who's continuing to be highly successful in the years after he successfully got his hex tech off the ground. He's created these hex gates that allow for like really fast, almost instantaneous travel between areas like kingdoms and stuff. He has created all this technology with Victor, and Heimerdinger is still kind of holding him back, telling him to just wait for a little bit more to try and perfect everything. Because Heimerdinger is clearly a perfectionist. He very much wants everything to be just flat out perfect and prepared before even attempting to show anything off. Unfortunately, this is kind of antithetical to the idea of being a scientist. Science is not about like pure, proven, and perfect facts. It's about theories and hypotheses. It's about testing and experimenting. Honestly, wanting to show off his work and like show what he's working on before it's perfectly finished and everything is very much a scientist mindset. So I don't know, it's weird, but I see Jace more as a scientist than Heimerdinger in terms of just general personality and how they're going about it. And Jace is so far the only character that I really like. Like, I'm not a huge fan of Jinx. I don't like Vi. The characters who died, Vander, Milo, and Clagor, were so uneventfully boring because they were literally just there to die. Caitlyn, I can't, on principle, like. Silco is not really likable. Kind of an asshole. And definitely a bad guy. Even if his ideals are rooted in positivity for his people and all, he's still a bad guy. I don't trust Victor still, like, at all. Heimerdinger annoys me. Not because of, like, his voice or anything like that. Just, again, the science thing. The other council member who's kind of backing Jace, we just don't know enough about her to actually form any kind of opinion about her yet. It's just like, yeah, Jace at this point is really the only character I can get behind. The only character I really like to any nominal degree. And I do like him. But I want more than just him, you know? So I hope we get more characters either becoming more likable or just more likable characters in general. But we'll see. We'll see. Um, the plot. It's hard to judge the plot when it does do a time skip like this and the plot kind of just changes. Because the plot in the first act is clearly not the plot in the second. There's a few points that carry over, but the main plot is very different. That's undeniable. Um, it's almost like two connected stories, but they're two separate stories at the same time. Because the first act was clearly about the relationship between these two sisters and everything that happens around them. And so far, the second act has switched gears to focusing on other characters. That might have just been the episode, mind you, but based off of episode 4, it switched gears to focusing on other characters and seems to be more about just the science and progress of the world instead of a more tightly in-depth story. And overall, the story of this act and even the third act might still wrap up into the story of the sisters again. But yeah, it just seems to have shifted focuses notably in the second act, where it feels almost like a different show, but you can tell it is still, again, connected to and following the events of the first. So yeah. But I'm interested to see what we've got in store for us here. Hopefully it starts to turn me around on things. But we'll have to see. I can't make any promises that I'm going to turn around and start liking this series a lot more. I even put up a tweet yesterday, as of recording this yesterday, I should say. I put up a tweet the other day, let's just say that, where I even said, this may be an unpopular opinion, but I actually like League of Legends, the game, more than I like Arcane, the series. Because League of Legends is entertaining and fun to me. I enjoy playing it, even if I haven't played it in a long time. Arcane, I'm finding quite a few issues with, and all in all, there's only one character I really like, and it just hasn't been impressing me. I don't understand the hype that this series is getting. Yeah, it's well animated, it's well voiced, and that's nice and all. But for me, characters and story always take priority. And in my eyes, that's where it's faltering. Not failing, but faltering. Right now, it's just kind of okay for me. Kind of in that middle area. It's not bad by any means. But the issues that it does have drag it down. And there aren't enough highs to make up for the lows. I mean, the entire first act was filled with absolute, ridiculous levels of, my mind is blanking on the word, stereotypes. It was as stereotypical and generic as hell. Let's put it that way. They really were following a lot of tropes. A lot. And that can be done well, but here I think it was just kind of... It just didn't work that well. It wasn't terrible. I've seen stuff like this done worse, but it wasn't great either. And then so far Act 2 seems to be going in a different direction, but that in and of itself almost kind of makes it jarring. And again, it's trying to make a cop likable, one of the likable characters, and I can't get behind that. So, yeah. Sorry for talking so fucking long in these pre-thoughts. I had to get that out there. Obviously, there has been chapters on the video and everything. Um, so you'll be able to see exactly when to skip ahead and everything. But I needed to talk about that entire issue and everything. Needed to get it out there. I'm not going to rant and ramble about it that long again. I might bring it up again, but not mention it that heavily again. But I needed to get that out there because it just was brought up last time. So, yeah. For now, let's just get into this episode before I ramble on any longer. So when the screen fades to black, pause as redirect and go to the description below. Follow the link to the reaction, and after you watch it, come back here to the redirect and resume play. Because after it fades to black then fades back in, everything from that point forward will be my afterthoughts and will contain spoilers to the episode. So, that being said, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you at the reaction. And we are back, and we'll begin with spoilers in 3, 2, 1, now. So I guess the best way to talk about this would be to kind of like split it up into like character focuses. And in that case, there's kind of, I guess, 4. So I'm going to talk about the first one, which is the shortest one and I feel the least interesting. And that's the enforcer, captain, chief, whatever you want to call him. I don't remember what Silco said his like position was or whatever. He's the leader of the enforcers. Let's just put it that way. Caitlyn's boss. So he is dealing with Silco, and not dealing with him as in taking care of him. He's working with him. They have agreements. They have they're working together. And although it seems like I'm just going to call him the captain. Although it seems like the captain may want to take Silco out, he's refusing to act on it. And instead is continuing to work and side with Silco. Even planning to throw these firelights, I believe they're called, under the bus for the entire situation that happened before. So this episode definitely showed us how corrupt the enforcers are. Going with what I said in the pre-thoughts, it's like, yeah, we kind of saw a little bit of that beforehand, but it's very clearly showing us that the cops in this world are corrupt as fuck. And that leads me into the second thing I want to talk about, Vi and Caitlyn. I'm going to talk about their entire side of this episode next. Because I want to specifically talk about Caitlyn because of how important that was to my thoughts in the pre-thoughts and all, especially in regarding to my little rant and ramble about cops. I said in the pre-thoughts here, and I said last week, that the only way I think I'll be able to accept Caitlyn and everything is if she leaves the police force. And again, she goes off to be like a private investigator, private enforcement, or bounty hunter, something like that. In this episode, she forges a document from Jace to break Vi out of prison. And then they go on an adventure in the Undercity to find out information about Silco. And Caitlyn doing this is not enough to make me like her. Because she's still actively a cop and everything. And again, unless something actively changes in that regard, I don't think I'm going to be able to like her, just on instinct. Especially after seeing in this episode how corrupt the enforcers are. And I think it's pretty clear that she knows at least something about that. She's not completely blind to their corruption. So she and Vi go to the Undercity, get some food, but eventually they go to this brothel. Let's be honest, it was very clearly that. And while Vi has Caitlin get distracted with a couple people there, first this dude in a mask, and then some lady, also in a mask. A lot of masks there. Vi goes to seek the person behind the establishment to try and find out some information. She doesn't find out much, but is able to locate one of the people working for Silco. They have a fight. It's okay, I guess. Nothing about the fight was like really fantastic or exceptional to me. It was just like, yeah, again, it's well animated, but that's about it. It was okay. And in the end, Vi does get the information from her that she wants about Powder's whereabouts. She finds out, to kind of her horror, that Powder is now known as Jinx and is not only working for Silco, but is a surrogate daughter to him. So that's fun. I'm wondering exactly how long it's going to take for them to actually have a confrontation. How long will it take for Jinx and Vi to actually re-meet each other after all this time? I'm hoping it happens next episode. I don't want it to happen in the last act. I think that would be just... It would be pushing it a little far, especially since, like, this story seems to be all about them. I just feel like they should show it in Act 2. And after the fact, Caitlin helps her when it looks like Vi is about to be taken down by this lady. Caitlin helps her, the lady runs away, and Caitlin and Vi stumble away. The third one I want to talk about is with Jinx, her side of things. So I talked about it last time, but Jinx does not feel like Jinx to me in here. Jinx is one of my mains in League of Legends. Like, one of the characters, one of the champions I play as the most, along with Ashe. And this character is very different. Jinx in League does not come across as a depressed, traumatized, like, victim. She comes across as a more psychotic Harley Quinn in the game, I should say, and is much more fun, kooky, silly, and unhinged. You see the briefest glimpses of a breadcrumb of that in her character here, but it's so downplayed that she just does not feel like the same character. And I think I said this last time as well, but maybe the idea is that she eventually becomes that, especially with this, let's be honest, baptism that fucking happens at the near the end of this episode. But let's be honest here. If that is how it goes, to where by like the end of this season she is more like the Jinx that I'm familiar with, you still have pretty much an entire season of a character who's just really not that good. She's not that entertaining or fun to watch. She's just this edgy, traumatized emo kid, basically, with a little bit of kookiness to her, just the tiniest breadcrumb of kookiness. And that's not entertaining to me. I'm not entertained by edgy emo characters. I'm not entertained by edgy, traumatized characters who have these family issues and stuff. It's so just unentertaining. And Vi's basically the same way. She's an edgy, buff meathead who has trauma and family issues from her past. That's not that interesting of a character. It really isn't. But we see Jinx here is struggling with her trauma. She keeps seeing the deaths of Milo and Clagor and Vander, and keeps thinking about how her sister, quote unquote, left her and everything, even though, like, she tried to go back for her. And it's affecting her. So Silco brings her to the waters where he was, quote unquote, reborn after Vander tried to drown him in the past. And he gives her a Joker Harley Quinn-esque baptism. Like, it very much reminds me of when Joker has Harley go into the same pit of chemicals that turned him into the Joker, causing her to become Harley Quinn. In some iterations of the story, mind you. Not every iteration has that, but... And it's just like, I would be a little more up for this if they read anything like either of those characters. But then, like, even the baptism thing is, like, just kind of, like... I don't know. I wouldn't really call it edgy, but it seems like it's trying very hard to say some kind of message with it. And it's like, really? It just seems very... I don't know. I don't know how to word it. I don't like it, though. And keep in mind, all of this is also in relation to how it's executed for me. All these issues I'm having. The execution is key because I've seen other shows do stuff like this and do it right. And do it well. And do it to where I've enjoyed it. But it's all about the execution. And I just don't think it's executed that well here. I'm sorry, I don't. But then we have Jace's side of the story, which is still, funny enough, the most interesting. Jace is starting to, with kind of the influence of the other counselor lady, to try and get all these other counselors and whatnot on his side in order to keep pumping up his hex tech goals and whatnot. And during all of this, his relationship with Victor is straining because Victor is focused on the science and the helping people aspect, and he, although he wants to focus on that, because he's now a counselor himself, he seems to be kind of forced into this position where he has to do other stuff. And Victor doesn't like this, and Victor is probably going to go evil at some point and turn on him, because I don't trust Victor, because nothing about him is trustworthy. Everything he says, everything he does just reads as really sketchy as fuck. Like, they're not even trying to make him trustworthy. Like, again, the dialogue, the way that the voice actor performs the role, the way just he looks and acts, everything about him is sketchy as fuck. And apparently Victor is a character from the games, but I don't know him that well. So I don't know if he was a good guy or a bad guy or just kind of his own neutral territory. I don't know. But then, while Victor is overworking himself, you could kind of say, Jace and this other counselor, I can never remember her name or whatnot, but they fuck. They kiss and fuck, and it's like, where the fuck did that come from? Seriously, I said in the reaction, I'm saying it again here. They have no romantic chemistry. And that romance came out of nowhere. Like, there was no hints that there was anything between them. And yet, all of a sudden, they're not just kissing, they're fucking. It's like, what? Why? This is so unbelievable that it's distracting from what is otherwise the best part of this series so far. The most interesting part of the series, especially with Jace not only realizing the corruption of Piltover and the council and the police and everything, but the fact that he wants to actively put a stop to it. Like, yeah, Jace, you're the character I like. The one character that I like. Keep doing that. Thank you. At least give me something to look forward to with this series. But then again, it's like, what the fuck is this romance? Like, what? It's so random and out of nowhere that it's, again, distracting. But then he ends up finding Victor passed out, gets him some help, and it's clear that Victor is in very bad shape. So don't know what's going to happen there. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. But yeah. This episode really didn't do anything to really change my mind, admittedly, one way or the other, on this series. Like, it didn't make me hate it any more than I already did, but it also didn't make me like it any more than I already did. It's like it's stagnated in very meh territory. And that's not a good thing either, to be fair. But we do have one more episode to go of Act 2. And again, my biggest hope is that we do have Vi and Jinx coming face to face in that. Because if they wait till the last act, that's a mistake. I'm sorry. But you guys know, if you've watched my content long enough, that I don't like it when they hold off on shit like that should just be taken care of. Or not like taken care of, but gotten to quicker. So many shows I've seen have just kind of like held off on certain things like that. Whether it be relationships or knowledge or whatnot. Probably the biggest offender that I can think of off the top of my head would have to be Little Witch Academia. With the fact that we knew that Ursula was Shiny Chariot pretty much the entire series. And Akko doesn't find out until the very end. And again, while it ended up working out, it's still annoying as fuck. Unbelievably so. And there is also Owl House, which admittedly, for as much as I love that show, did have this issue of holding off on revealing pretty much anything about Luz's mother until way too long. And that was the reason I originally dropped the series in the first place. Luckily, I did pick it back up thanks to a donation reward, but that's neither here nor there at the moment. Yeah, it's the same kind of deal here with me. It's like Jinx and Vi need to reconnect here. Not like in a good way necessarily, but they need to see each other again. And honestly, it should happen next episode. again, this series is clearly meant to be their story, with some other stories spread throughout about it, but they're meant to be the main focuses for sure. So to have them separated the entirety of Act 2 and never come in contact with each other during it would just feel wrong. I feel like they should come in contact, not have like a full fight necessarily, but they should see each other in Act 2, in the next episode. And then in Act 3, they can have their full fight, which is definitely going to happen. But yeah, we definitely should at least have them see each other, come face to face, and have to deal with that. That's my biggest hope for the next episode. In terms of just in general with the rest of this series, next episode and then Act 3, I just want it to become something entertaining. Because it's just not doing it for me. I don't understand the hype behind it at all. This series is getting an ungodly amount of hype. Everyone loves it. It's getting 10 out of 10s on all of these review sites. All of these reviewers are talking about how amazing it is, and it's like, it's really not. I know it's all subjective, but again, it's like it's a weird situation where I'm just in the heavy minority here. And I'm the one with the unpopular opinion, and I acknowledge that. But I don't get it. It's another one of those where I also just don't understand why this is so beloved. The writing is not that tight. The characters are not that great. All it's really got going for it is really good, unique animation and great voice acting. Again, the voice acting's fantastic. Like, that's all it's got going for it. And I can kind of see why people are shipping Vi and Caitlyn after this episode. But it's like, there's just some playful banter there. There's not really anything concrete. I can see it, and I can understand the ship. I don't necessarily side with the ship, especially because I think that would be just ethically fucked to have someone who has been victimized by the enforcers for most of her life. Hell, all of her life, really. Like her and Powder's, they became orphans of war because of the enforcers. We literally saw that in the opening scene of this series. The fact that she's even willing to work with one of them is already completely fucked up as it is. But the idea of shipping them, it's just like, I can see why people do it, but I can't. Again, unless Caitlyn leaves the enforcers, I can't get behind that. It's just, I can't get behind the idea of shipping a person who has been so heavily victimized by the enforcers with an enforcer. That just reads as ethically wrong to me. So I'm genuinely hoping that Caitlyn does leave the enforcers for two reasons. One, because then I can like her. Because here's the thing, Caitlyn is being portrayed as extremely likable in terms of her personality, her motivations, her character and skills and everything. She's being portrayed as really likable, but the problem is she is actively choosing to be part of this extremely, as we see in this episode, corrupt organization. And again, not something I can reconcile. And not something I will even try to reconcile. And so, because of that, I can't fully like her. because I actually straight up hate that part of her because of my hatred for the police. So, yeah. But the second reason, outside of just the fact that she is being written and everything to be generally likable, and I want to be able to like her, the second reason is because of the kind of message that would send and tell. Because it would show a message of a cop who has chosen to abandon the force out of knowledge of its corruption and instead choose to strike off on her own outside of, quote unquote, outside of the law. That would be so much of a important, good story to tell and would resonate hard with real life. Plus, on the upside, it would also allow for me to back the ship a little bit. Which, I'm always for queer ships. And it very much seemed like again, Vi only kind of hooked up Caitlin with the first dude in the mask. She went over to that other lady on her own while Vi was occupied. Caitlin might just be queer, and she might be bi or pan or something. It might say that she is sapphic in general, lesbian, and might have preferred to go over to the woman, because let's be honest, she seemed a lot more comfortable with her than she did with the guy. And that would be an even bigger statement too, the fact that she would be queer and that she would be a former cop who has abandoned them after seeing their corruption. That would actually work extremely well. Obviously, do not tell me in the comments if that happens or whatnot, but that is the only thing that will help me with her character at this point in time. But yeah, I really do hope that they do make that choice, because if not, it's going to, one, be a huge missed opportunity, and two, it's going to keep her as unlikable to me, as someone I diametrically cannot side with or like. And that's disappointing to me. It really is. So I'm hoping that they do that. And I'm hoping they give some of these other characters more depth than just being edgy, traumatized people. Vi and Jinx need to have more to their characters. They're so boring right now. And can we please just abandon this weird love thing with Jace and the other counselor? Because it just, again, it came out of nowhere, makes no real sense. There's no real chemistry there. I would be fine if they just completely forgot it ever happened. And it just never went anywhere. And by the way, a second season is confirmed of this. And that if some of these issues are not resolved until the second season, that's still a major problem. Because these are issues that have to be solved within this first season. Such as the thing with Caitlin and giving some of these characters more actual character. And I haven't talked about him a lot either, but Silco is very boring too. He's not an interesting villain at all. He's just not fun to watch. But either way, I've bitched about this enough for today. We are continuing. I know that probably wasn't entirely clear, but we're not dropping this or anything. We are continuing. Because at this point, we only have one more part in this act, and then we have Act 3. It's like we're gonna get through it. Whether or not I continue after that into season 2 when that eventually comes out is another story. But I will determine that probably by the end of season 1. We'll see. Depends on how season 1 goes and how it ends out. Um, but yeah, it's like there's some things about this to enjoy, but it's mostly I'm just mostly finding like everything about it to not. All these issues constantly with the series, and again, I don't understand the hype. I don't get why people are like losing their absolute shit over this series. I don't get why people are practically climaxing after watching this. It's like it makes no sense to me. If you like it that much, good on you. I hope that you continue to love this series as it goes into the second season when that comes out. I hope that you continue to find other shows that you love that much. But again, it's just personally, I don't understand the hype. To me, this series is very mediocre. But like I said, we'll see where it goes. Hopefully, it gets better. So when the screen fades to, or wow, I was trying to do my. I think I did that before just recently too, like last week or something. I don't know. Either way, thank you so much for tuning in. And for now, I'm Connie and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.